Seats, we're about to start the IAS Members meeting. I hope you're all feeling still on top of the world. Day 4 or day 3, I'm not quite sure how to put that, day 4 of the AIDS 2018 conference. Great. It's lovely to see so many of our members here this evening. So, absolutely thrilled to welcome you all to AIDS 2018 members meeting of the International AIDS Society. My name is Linda Gail Becker. I'm the president of the International AIDS Society for about another 24 hours. But it's been a most amazing roller coaster ride, and I've absolutely enjoyed it. I have to tell you, you guys are members in the most extraordinary membership meeting, group, organization, I'm lost for words, society. I think this conference is a reflection of the energy, the spirit, the solidarity, the awesome science, the collective brain power of our community, and you, as the Members Society, really epitomize that. So welcome, feel at home. I do want to say right from the outset, very important to note, and I said it at the opening, that this year we sadly lost a very important person in our community, someone we dearly loved and you know, already feel has left an enormous gap in our community, and that is David Cooper. And during this meeting, we will be paying tribute to him, and we want to thank some guests you're going to hear about a little bit more who've traveled far to make sure that we properly say how grateful we were for the life that David lived, and it truly was a well-lived life. Very importantly, though, I want to thank Ilana, Dave's daughter, for being here representing the family. We really, really value having you here, and I hope that the AIDS conference will be a memorable kind of connection to your dad, and we just really want you to know that we love you and the rest of the family. And we will now get into the business. I'll hand over to our Executive Director, Owen Ryan.
Thanks, Linda Gail. And as Linda Gail said, we have a very important moment as part of the meeting today. So what normally is a slightly more extended update on the Secretariat is shorter today, largely because we put more effort into our annual report, which many of you will have seen already. So I would say if you have an opportunity, go through the annual report. We spend a lot of time on making sure that that is a snapshot of where we are as a Secretariat and where our work is, and would love to engage with you and discuss with you more on that. I do have a very short slide presentation, so as I keep talking to Stahl to figure out where that slide presentation is, it's there. That's amazing. So I will do this very quickly. Just so you have a sense, Kevin and I are going to divide this up. I've already spoiled the lead by even mentioning Kevin, but I will go through this quickly. One of the biggest things, a lot of folks who come to our members meeting get to see our conference work and have seen our conference work evolve over time. And we're really proud, as you'll hear tomorrow, that the International AIDS Conference remains very strong. This is one of the largest international AIDS conferences we've had. We're very fortunate to have folks from around the world here. But our HIV programs have also grown quite a bit as well. So I think some folks have been fortunate to participate in our quickly growing programmatic landscape. Other folks, this information might be a bit new, but I would ask you that as a member, you have an opportunity to engage in all of this programmatic work, and it is all outlined in our annual report, and we would welcome your participation and engagement. You can see there, over the past few years, we've always had as a core the Industry Liaison Forum, our pediatric work with Cypher, our Towards a Cure work, the Journal of the International AIDS Society, and our HIV co-infections work. And this is work that much of this was established by our governing council members. We have our past president, Françoise Barry-Sinoussi, to thank for much of our work on Towards a Cure that is now being co-chaired by Sharon Lewin. There is a lot of work here. Our governing council members are part of the Journal and part of Cypher and part of ILF. So I would encourage you to be part of the council and part of these programs. We have also expanded with thanks to many donors to differentiated service delivery, the IAS Educational Fund, which you will see more of shortly, Youth Voices, a very particular focus on engagement of youth-led networks, the Mark Weinberg Fellowships that Anton is going to present on shortly, the IAS Lancet Commission, which I will say is immediately following this evening. That commission was co-chaired by Chris Beyer, our past president, and Linda Gale Becker, our current president. And there is some fantastic modeling work about integrating the response to HIV. Again, that session on the Lancet Commission immediately follows this members meeting, so I'd ask you to stick around. And the way we can help you do that is we have some food and some alcoholic beverages to keep you around. So enjoy that afterwards. And then, growing forward, we have our global HIV vaccine enterprise. We are very fortunate to have taken on the enterprise after a competitive bid process, and we have been working with partners for a while now to make sure this is a strong focus on the future of vaccines. We are only slightly starting to touch on that now because we will launch our strategy around that at the Research for Prevention Conference, which is part of the growing family of IAS conferences. And that conference will be in October in Madrid. So if you are going to R4P 2018, you will see more about the vaccine enterprise work there. So forgive me for going quickly. I did want to say what many folks don't realize is that as we bring money in for these programs, we feel a strong obligation with our success to give a lot of this funding back. And some of this happens through education and access initiatives. So as you'll see here, since 2014, Cypher has provided $2.8 million in research towards pediatric grants and fellowships. That makes us one of the larger funders of pediatric research in the world. We have also, through the Educational Fund, provided 500 scholarships, 2 IAS-hosted meetings, as well as 16 national meetings over the last 2 years with more than 2,300 attendees. And those meetings are unique because they're not just what you see here. What we do is we take all the evidence, in particular the rapporteur slides that come out of this, and we translate them into a national and a regional context, and we meet with scientists and national program planners on a national and regional level to talk through what that means for the response locally. And many of you have participated in those. Thank you. And some of you have even led those. So we're very appreciative for that. I will show you in just a minute where those are taking place. You'll see the differentiated service delivery work has provided over $700,000 to national PL-HIV networks. We're very proud of our partnerships with ITPC and with ARASA, which is supporting work in Southern and Eastern Africa and in Southeast Asia to look at best practice for differentiating care for people living with HIV. And you can see the rest there. You've had a chance to read while I ramble on, so I won't read through the whole slide. But this is really important for us that all of our programming includes support to civil society and community networks throughout the world. So much of our work involves re-granting to those groups or partnership therein. This is our educational fund. So this is where they've all happened. And that slide can be very, oh no, it's not too bad when it's big. It's really difficult here. But you'll see over the last 2 years, we've been able to host meetings in all of these settings. And they take on very different sizes and stripes, but they're all meant to say we cannot keep the evidence that we present here at our conferences in these halls. If you all leave and this evidence doesn't go anywhere, there was no point to this conference, right? It needs to translate into local settings. We recognize we can do this better. We recognize it is a process that is iterative and perfecting itself over time, and the only way we can get better at this is if you help us do that. So we'd really like to know how we can better improve doing these meetings in a national setting that apply directly to your day-to-day work. And if you're not seeing the IAS being applicable to your day-to-day work, I want you to come and tell us that. I mean that very seriously. And Kevin and I share this value that it's important that our members feel like this work has value in meeting. And if it doesn't, it's important that you call us out on that. So I did want to say what our membership looks like today. We have been fortunate for some time now that the United States, South Africa, and Western Europe really make up the bulk of our membership percents, and this is all in our annual report as well. We have a lot of work to do in other regions of the world. We were fortunate to have meetings in Kuala Lumpur and in Melbourne that really helped us quite a bit in attracting more members from the Asia region. We are looking forward to IAS 2019 in Mexico City to address what is currently a notable deficit in members from Latin America and the Caribbean. We continue to partner with HIV and hepatitis in the Americas to make sure that that's a conference where we can support IAS members who attend as well. And then just some more here. You will see that we are getting closer to parity in terms of gender in our membership, though we are nowhere near the number of transgender members that we would like to have. So we would like to get your support in making sure that transgender networks feel supported by the IAS. And you can see there the regions and the occupations that people identify as part of our membership. So finally, I have the great privilege of handing over the stage to Kevin Osborne, who is our new executive director. You'll have seen our announcement. Kevin has more than 30 years of experience in the HIV response. We were very proudly stole him from FHI 360, where he was running the Linkages Project, and he has been running our HIV programs and advocacy department. We are very grateful that he is our next leader, and I couldn't be more proud to hand over this clicker to him right now. So Kevin, over to you. Good job, sir. I just want to get rid of you. More symbolic.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I must say it's a real big honor to take on this challenge and opportunity that it brings. But before I even get into some of the priorities for the 2 years ahead, I have to look at Linda Gale and Anton and say, Linda Gale, you said you've got a year, it's 24 hours left, and Anton, you're saying you're going to start over and you've got 24 hours left in this different life. So we look at that transition. But also Owen, taking over a job that Owen's done at the IAS, and I'm sure you'll all agree. When Owen started 4 years ago, the IAS, what it was and what it represented for people, was a very different place. So in some ways, to take over this job is a testimony to the work that you've done over 4 years and to the leadership thrown by our governing council, both our past president, Chris, who's in the front row here, and Linda Gale. So please, I want to just recognize them for their work. A lot's been made. I'm going to let you in on a couple of things. A lot's been made of the fact that I'm openly HIV positive. And because I've been living with HIV for over half my life, I like to think it's part of me, but it's not all of me. But there's something that when it was announced, I must have received over 200 emails about it. And it did something for me because it made me realize that something that I take so for granted and that many of us take for granted still has such absolute resonance in the community. So my challenge, and I'm going to ask a lot of the community folk that are here or other people living with HIV to say, how can I make sure that during my tenure at the IAS, I can make sure that the role that people living with HIV plays is meaningful and relevant in a way that sets us fit for the future? So I'm going to work with a lot of you to define that. So we sit in place systems and structures to better support communities in a way that is really meaningful, because I was really touched by the nerve that announcement made. That's number one. Number two is to say that we're a membership-based organization. So how do we increasingly make sure that we reflect your values, your choices, your decisions? So Owen's hinted at two things. We've got both conferences that we do as a neutral convener, and we've also got the program work. And we've listed some of the program work that we do. If there are any places where you feel, I'd like to get involved, I'd like to know more, please reach out, because those programs only become as strong as your engagement on them. And secondly, if there are things that we should be doing and we want to make members matter, please reach out, because this organization is only going to be as strong as we reflect all of your needs and priorities. And the third thing relates to maybe a little bit about process. The AIDS community has always been one where we can agree and disagree on certain things. But at least over my years of experience, we may have different roads that get us to a difficult solution, but we do that in a mutually respectful and honest way. And we're open for dialogue and discussion around thorny issues, because I think what unites us is more than what divides us. So in that spirit of dialogue, discussion, which has always been what the IAS has embraced, I'd like to make sure that as we travel the next challenging years ahead, both in terms of where HIV situates itself in the global community, in the global response, we may have differing opinions of how we get there. But as long as we get on that road together in a way that is mutually beneficial and one that is respectful of the very priorities and core values that we all believe as a community around human rights, I think we can often agree to disagree on certain things. So I want to end by saying to Owen and Linda Gale again, thank you for the challenge and the opportunity of taking on this position. And I look forward to working with all of you to making the IAS become even fitter for the future. Cool. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Anton Bosniak, who's going to take over from Linda Gale. So his next 24 hours is also going to change dramatically. Anton.
There's always that quiet moment when technology wins, yeah? So it's my great pleasure, actually, to award the Mark Weinberg Fellowship Programs. Mark Weinberg was a good friend of mine. He was the dean at McGill University. He was a great HIV researcher, virologist, and a lot of his work was pioneering in resistance. Also, it's interesting, his early work led to the discovery of 3TC, which millions of people are benefiting from today. But Mark was also an activist, an advocate, and a great supporter of those in training and those people that were coming up through the ranks. So it's quite fitting that this fellowship award is named after Mark. Now, many African countries face an unmet need in the training of medical practitioners who want to become specialized in HIV. HIV medicine subspecialization is not attractive for many young healthcare professionals, which is in sharp contrast to the need for such specialized personnel and leadership in the hardest hit countries in sub-Saharan Africa. The Mark Weinberg Fellowship Program, an initiative of the IAS Educational Fund, is aimed at contributing to improving the quality of HIV service delivery in resource-limited settings by providing 2-year fellowships to 5 clinicians from sub-Saharan Africa who will spend 1 year in Europe and 1 year in Africa at clinical institutions. The program will offer in-depth training for clinicians committed to careers in HIV clinical service delivery in sub-Saharan Africa, with the aim of strengthening access to high-quality services for those populations living there, with a client-centered service delivery approach and particularly emphasis on care for different patient groups, including key populations. It's anticipated that the fellowship will help build capacity, foster clinical research, and develop long-term sustainable partnerships, and I hope many friendships. The Mark Weinberg Fellowship Program has recruited outstanding healthcare professionals to spend time in HIV specialized centers and be given the opportunity to develop their clinical and research skills, culminated in a postgraduate diploma in HIV. The fellows will move to their host institutions in October this year, and the Mark Weinberg Fellowship Program was made possible through support from ViiV Healthcare. So, it's great pleasure for me to introduce the 2018 Mark Weinberg Fellows. The first is Victor Singano, who's currently working at Dignitas International Zomba Central Hospital in Malawi. Victor will spend his fellowship in the UK at Chelsea and Westminster and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. Victor. Congratulations. And you can hold it. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Shamin Ali. Currently at Moi University in Kenya, Shamin will go to the Infectious Diseases Institute at Makerere University in Uganda and the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in the UK. Shamin, please come. And thirdly, I'd like to introduce Leonid Thomas da Costa Joaquim, who is with the Hospital Militaire de Maputo in Mozambique. Leonid will spend 2 years at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, and the Instituto de Higiene e Medicina Tropical, Portugal. Leonid. And finally, Adama Doumbia from the Centre Hospitalier Universitaire de Trécheville in Côte d'Ivoire. Adama will complete his fellowship in France at the Centre Hospital Universitaire Saint-Antoine, France, and in Côte d'Ivoire at the University Félix Houphouët. I don't know how to pronounce this well, but I think it's Houphouët-Boigny. So Francoise will tell me later how to do it. Photo? No, stay there all together. That's it. Okay. Can we get us all in? Please congratulate them. Thank you.
So to present our financial report and update, I'm going to introduce our Director of Finance and Administration, Olivia Mettler. She is sitting in for Celia, who had an injury earlier this year, but has reviewed all the finances and with the Financial Subcommittee has approved the report. So Olivia is presenting for Celia.
Thank you. The objective of this presentation is to get approval of the audited financial statement and of the auditor for the year 2018. As an introduction, for ease of reference, the consolidated financial report includes all IAS activities. The statement of income and expenditure for the IAS conference 2017 will be presented separately. The reports were audited by KPMG and issued on the 15th of June. The complete version of the report can be found on our website. All figures are given in USD. We'll talk about the revolving funds, which ensure the sustainability of the conference. Merci. Restricted and designated funds, which are reserve of money received in advance and restricted for ongoing and future projects. So 2017 at a glance. So 2017, you will see, was a very strong year. If we start with the number of full-time employees, we had 52, same as 2016. HIV program and initiative were all balanced. The IAS 2017 conference made a surplus of 485, which was allocated to the IAS conference revolving fund. The number of paid registration was just above 5,000, while in Vancouver it was just under 4,000. And back in July 2017, the GC took the decision to invest $1 million in financial assets. So all financial instruments like forest contracts are made in the purpose of currency age. 2017 was the first year of the implementation of a formalized internal control system, which became mandatory in 2017 since we reached 3 thresholds. The auditor recommendation was that the 2017 financial statement be approved by the GC, and the 2017 audited statements were reviewed and approved by the GC last Friday. So we start with the balance sheet, which reflects IAS position at the end of 2017. It's a comparison between 2016 and 2017. Assets remain stable while liabilities decrease a bit. You see also the 3 revolving funds with the allocation of the IAS 2017 surplus, the general reserve, and the other designated and restricted funds mentioned earlier. Sorry. The profit and loss, so still a comparison between 2016 and 17. 17 was split by activities like Secretariat, HIV program, and conference. 2017 was the year of an IAS conference, which is a small conference and which explained the decrease in conference income, sponsors, donors, consulting fees, and direct expense, while salaries, legal fees, and office expense remain the same. And we will end with the IAS 2017, so the Paris conference statement. So Paris conference was a 7 million budget conference with almost 8,000 participants in total. No major surprise. Actuals and approved budget are really close to each other, and you see at the end of the table the 485 allocated to the revolving fund. Voilà. It is now time for questions and approval. So, no question. It's good. So, do you approve the 2017 consolidated financial statement?
So we'll need an
you.
approver and a seconder. I see approvers, I see seconders. So,
and the IAS 2017 conference statement as well.
Approvers, somebody, thanks.
Thank you.
Second, thank you.
Thank you. And the auditor, which would be KPMG for 2018.
Motion, thank you. Seconded, thank you.
Thank you. And also take this opportunity to thank Roy Chan and Alex Muganzi for their support in the Finance Subcommittee, and who are now passing the torch since they are leaving the GC. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you very much, Olivia. I'm just going to go back here because we have a little more business, and then we can get on with what we really want to do here at the members' meeting. But first of all, I need to do the business of just telling you how the Governing Council is coming together in the next year. And first of all, it's important to welcome Anton Pozniak as the next president. You've just heard. Adiba Kamaralzaman from Malaysia is not with us, but she will be the next president-elect. And as you've heard, Celia Christie Samuels from Jamaica, also not present, will continue as our treasurer. We are very delighted to be welcoming onto the Governing Council Beatrice Grinstein from Brazil, and I'm going to ask you to stand up as I say your names, please, and remain standing. Beatrice Grinstein. Jen Cates from the United States. Andrei Klepikov from Ukraine. Kiletso Makofani from South Africa. Cristina Mussini, Italy. And Nitya Panupak, These are all newly elected members of the IAS Governing Council. Thank you. I'm going to ask you to keep standing because we're going to add more names, and then I'm going to, we can give a recognition of all of the council in a moment. But just to thank those who are rolling off, Roy Chan, also resident, unfortunately, from Singapore, Sergei Dvoryak from Ukraine, Ken Mayer from the United States, Alex Muganzi from Uganda, Mauro Schechter from Brazil, Stefano Vello, also from Europe, Italy, not present. And we really want to thank those folk for their most amazing service over many years. I also want to thank somebody very special to me, the immediate past president, Chris Byra, who will be stepping down officially from the Governing Council. We're going to come back and say more about that in a moment, but just to note that. And now I'm going to ask all the other Governing Council members to, and I just realized that I should also congratulate Ada Adamora and Sergei Paul Eholi respectively from United States and Cote d'Ivoire on their re-election. So congratulations to both of you. And I'm going to ask all the other Governing Council members present now to stand just so that we can identify faces. I'm not going to go through names, but just so you, in your region, if you can recognize your people. And I want to thank the Governing Council team and the officers and those who are coming on. And thank you for your commitment to service. We really appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you, everyone. I'm now going to ask at this top table to take their seats, and we're going to move quickly into the part of the agenda that we feel is a very important thing to do, and that is to remember Dave Cooper. And to do this, I'm going to call on our co-chairs, Françoise Barré-Suissi and Sharon Lewin, to come up and join us on the stage here. I'm not going to go into, if you'll forgive me, co-chairs, I'm not going to go into great detail on your bios because we want to get on to the business, and I think everybody knows Françoise Barré-Suissi. Apart from her distinguished career, I also want to note she obviously is our immediate past president. She was president of the International AIDS Society between 2012 and 2014, very involved in our Towards a Cure initiative, a founder of that, in fact, and I'm going to leave it there for now. Sharon is director of the Peter Doherty Institute for Infection and Immunity. She comes from Melbourne. She's a professor of medicine and is a present Governing Council member and has taken over the chairship of the Towards a Cure initiative. But I'm now going to hand over to the two of you to take us through this part of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda Gell. I would like first to thank the IAS for organizing this terrible moment of remembering David Cooper. It's very moving for me, to speak today. Unfortunately, I was not able to go to the event, which was organized in Sydney several weeks ago. But for me, David, I know him since the mid-80s. David, in the mid-80s, diagnosed the first case of HIV in Australia. Soon after, I remember he came to us at Pasteur Institute to talk to us about HIV, about possibility also to maybe collaborate together. And David, as you all know, was really a pioneer in the field of HIV since really the early years. And David has already in mind really to work together with communities since the very beginning. I remember also David starting together with Joep Lange, the collaboration with Southeast Asia. They developed together the NAT, HIV NAT program, in order to develop clinical trial together with the Thai Red Cross in Bangkok. David decided also to start to make a research program with Cambodia. And it turned out that that was also a good issue for us to be in relationship together, because I have been coordinating the program for the National Agency for AIDS and HIV and viral hepatitis research in Cambodia for almost 25 years. And at the same time, David was also conducting a research program in Cambodia. So I had all the opportunity, to exchange and to try also to coordinate the program between the one which were developed by Australia and the one developed by the NRS, in particular program on co-infection, HIV and TB. In 2014, when Sharon and I were organizing the conference in Melbourne, the AIDS conference in Melbourne, David kindly invited me. He invited me to come in Sydney to visit the Kirby Institute, and also David kindly asked the university to nominate me as an honorary doctorate of the New South Wales University. I will remember this moment forever. I will remember this moment forever because it was a big honor, and it was really a wonderful time for visiting the Kirby Institute. But in addition, for me, the drama at that time, the MH17. And certainly at that moment, because of the relationship, the close relationship of David with Joep, and also my own relationship with youth, we started to talk together. And I remember David telling me, Françoise, I feel that is one of my first experience to really lose somebody who I was so close. I never imagined at that time, 4 years ago, that David will be lost as well 4 years later. So they are together today, Joep, David, and of course, they are with us forever. So it's a moving moment, but we will have other moving moments because we will remember David during this special session. And now I'm going to call Sharon to take the floor.
Thank you, Françoise, for those very moving memories and words of your relationship and also the most recent time with David in 2014. As a fellow Australian and colleague and friend of David's, I'm really honoured to co-chair the IAS's tribute to David's memory and his extraordinary contributions to the global HIV response. Through his innovative research, mentorship of generations of clinicians, scientists and community members, and I think most importantly for many of us in Australia and the Asia Pacific region, for his visionary leadership. I wanted to also pay a special welcome to Alana, representing David's family here today. We all share your loss, Alana, and wish you, Beck and Dory, every strength in what I know continues to be a very difficult time. I know that all the members of the International AIDS Society also share that great sadness from David's death. But today, we hope to both honour and, of course, celebrate his great legacy. In the many obituaries written about David, a recurring word was giant. And I think giant is a perfect word because his contributions were immense and impossible to fathom that one person could have achieved all that. Today we'll hear from David's colleagues, friends, mentees, mentor, and the many and varied people he inspired. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Lisa Singh, who will pay tribute to David from the Australian Parliament. Senator Singh is an Australian senator from the state of Tasmania and the Australian Labor Party. She has a strong focus on human rights and international development, and also co-chairs the Australian Parliamentary Friendship Group for HIV and AIDS, which led her to become involved in the work of David's and the team at the Kirby Institute. She also works closely with the Global Fund, advocating for the Australian government's replenishments and for greater support for research and treatment of HIV, TB and malaria in the Asia-Pacific region. We're all tremendously grateful of Lisa's work and delighted that she's here today. Welcome, Lisa Singh.
Thank you very much, Sharon and Francoise. I would like to firstly thank members of the International AIDS Society and the Society itself for inviting me here to Amsterdam to provide some perspectives from the Australian Parliament in memory and in honour of Professor David Cooper, AO. I and many of my colleagues in the Australian Parliament were shocked and deeply saddened to hear of the loss of Professor Cooper in March this year. However, I was fortunate enough to join with David's family and friends and colleagues last month at a beautiful, beautiful public memorial at Sydney's Town Hall to pay tribute to his life and work. Among the more than 1,000 people that came together for David were former Labor Health Minister Neil Blewett, former Liberal Senator Peter Baum, former New South Wales Health Minister Gillian Skinner, former Governor of New South Wales Marie Bashir, and Tanya Plibersek MP, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the Australian Parliament. Speakers who paid tribute to Professor Cooper included the Lord Mayor of Sydney, Clover Moore, Associate Professor Anthony Shembury, the Chief Executive Officer at Sydney's St Vincent Hospital, Scienza Professor John Caldor of the Kirby Institute, David's daughters Beck and Ilana who's here with us today, and the Honourable Michael Kirby AC, CMG, former High Court judge and patron of the Kirby Institute, who is also here with us today. Mr. Kirby spoke movingly about Professor Cooper's leadership and legacy and the importance of ensuring the continuation of his research aimed at eliminating HIV around the world. I want to share with you a quote from Mr. Kirby's tribute from that day. He said, "We should be proud of such a scientist and of our country, its universities and the institutions that produced him, his family that nurtured him, his religion that taught him, the patients that loved him. But he was not ours alone. He belonged to the world of science, and today we honour him as a global hero. Professor Ian Jacobs, the President and Vice-Chancellor of the University of New South Wales in Sydney, also remembered David Cooper as a wonderful leader, colleague, mentor, and a brilliant mind. Professor Jacobs said, "There are few people I have met, not just in medical research, but anywhere, who combined David's intellect, passion, and compassion. His dedication to his research was surpassed only by the care and dignity with which he treated his patients." That memorial that day in Sydney Town Hall and the scientific symposium in his honour, which I opened the following day, were both enriched by his posthumous award of the Companion in the General Division of the Order of Australia for his service to medicine in the areas of HIV and AIDS research. As Mr. Kirby said, and I quote, "David was one of our finest, bravest and best scientists and citizens. This is a shining consolation for his wife Dorrie, his family, his colleagues at the Kirby Institute and far beyond." And indeed it was. Professor Cooper's dedication to saving lives all around the world through prevention, treatment and cure of HIV and other infectious diseases stemmed from the principle that health is a fundamental human right, and no one would be turned away from the best options available for treatment and prevention, regardless of their social or personal circumstances. David turned Australia, indeed, into a global leader in the fight against HIV and AIDS. He contributed to the development of every therapeutic drug used in HIV. And in my role as Deputy Chair of the Parliamentary Liaison Group for HIV, bloodborne viruses and sexually transmitted diseases, and along with my chair, Senator Dean Smith, I work with federal politicians from all parties to raise awareness and understanding within our Australian Parliament of issues relating to HIV and diseases, and to promote very much the human rights and prevent the stigma and discrimination against those living with hepatitis, with HIV. David Cooper led the clinical trial of pre-exposure prophylaxis, PrEP, to eliminate HIV transmission in the state of New South Wales in Australia. And now, in Australia, we have just taken a major step towards forward by having PrEP listed on our pharmaceutical benefits scheme, making it accessible and affordable for all in the country. However, we know that the international challenges in the region are much more significant, and that is where David was continuing his work. Over my past few days here at this International AIDS Conference, the very first International AIDS Conference I've attended, I have heard some amazing people speaking about their work. I've also got to know over the time, through David, the amazing team around him at the Kirby Institute, and to hear from amazing people in Australia. And I think it is those people here, and indeed back at home in Australia, that provide a fitting testament to David and evidence that his legacy is being pushed forward. Indeed, David's groundbreaking collaborative disease research lives on with so many of you here in the room today. And on behalf of the Australian Parliament, can I say to David and his family, Vale David Cooper.
Professor Andrew Grulich will provide a perspective from the Kirby Institute. Andrew joined the Kirby at the University of New South Wales, Sydney in 1995, and since 2002 has been the head of the HIV Epidemiology and Prevention Program. He's a past president of the Australian Society for HIV Medicine and a past governing council member of the International AIDS Society. He was a very close friend and colleague of David's. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Sharon. So I've been asked here today to represent the Kirby Institute and share with you some of our feelings about the long relationship we had with David. David was, of course, the only director we ever had. He created the Institute in 1985 with just a handful of staff at a terrifying and appalling time. Today, the Kirby is an international research organisation with more than 300 staff and students working across the fields of HIV, viral hepatitis and STIs. That enormous growth and success of the Institute was David's life and work. His career traversed the entire history of AIDS, and as my colleague Basil Donovan said, he was the right man in the right place at the right time. He was, of course, a brilliant scientist, and the story of how he came to be the first to recognise HIV seroconversion illness is an absolutely ripping yarn of medical discovery. It was his clinical acumen and laboratory expertise which allowed him to put the puzzle together. The gay men returning to Sydney from wild holidays in New York and San Francisco with drenching sweats and fevers. The pattern of CD4 cell count decline and recovery, which is now familiar to us. The science of it was one thing, but I was very, very moved by the humanity with which he relayed that story. And in fact, the fact that one of the men in that original case series, which appeared in The Lancet, went on to become one of his closest research colleagues and a much-loved friend before his death from AIDS in 1995. David's humanity and his pragmatic approach to getting the job done was able to amplify the effects of his intellectual brilliance to directly improve the lives of people living with HIV. It also helped transform the Australian response to the epidemic. He was a leader in every sense of the word, and he understood the need to bring together all sectors for the most effective HIV response: the policymakers, the doctors, the pharmaceutical industry, and most importantly, people living with HIV and the communities most affected by HIV. David noted that his own experiences of discrimination as a young Jewish man growing up in Sydney made it easier for him to relate to the discrimination that gay men, sex workers, injecting drug users and other marginalised populations were experiencing. He could also be a lot of fun. I have some great memories of this. In 1999, he led the Kirby Institute's first entry in Sydney's gay and lesbian Mardi Gras parade. If any of you have ever been, you'll know it's a riotous event. He towered above us. He was wearing his academic robes, peering down a 4-metre high replica laboratory microscope. Sharon mentioned he was a giant. In fact, he was so high up that I was worried that as the truck passed along the street that the electrical wires would take his head off. Thankfully for us and his family and for science, that did not happen. But surrounding him on the street level were dozens of his staff members, his teenage daughters, Ilana and Becky, in a choreographed reconstruction of the fight between the virus, the T cells, and the antiretroviral medications. It was a brilliant night, and David relished the opportunity to lead us down the parade, and Becky and Ilana relished the opportunity to fill their dad's hair with glitter. In his more than 30 years of research at the Kirby, David played a leading role in almost all the key trials that led to the optimal use of life-saving combination treatment. He was working right up to the time of his illness, running large-scale international clinical trials and building research capacity in places such as Indonesia and Myanmar. It was his work in HIV prevention that brought him closer to me in recent years, and I was his co-leader in the last major study he led, the trial of pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is leading to absolutely unprecedented reductions in HIV transmissions in Australia. Only 1 week before his illness struck, he negotiated a major donation to support my work in anal cancer prevention in gay men and others with HIV. Looking into the future, it is hard for us all to imagine the Kirby Institute's collaborative efforts without David at our helm. We're still getting used to the fact that he isn't about to come back from a week at a conference or a few weeks on a walking holiday. However, our institute is David's legacy, and we know that he would take great pride in us powering forward in our mission of fighting infectious diseases. Thank you.
Erin Kogel is the Executive Director of the National Association of People Living with HIV. You heard earlier about David's passion for community partnerships. It's paved the way for how we have responded to HIV in Australia, and therefore we're delighted that Erin is here with us today to provide a community perspective.
Thanks, Sharon. I have a photo album that will scroll in the background there. It doesn't relate directly to what I'm going to say, but it's there to give you, I hope, a sense of David's extraordinary collaborative and supportive approach when working with community. So much has been acknowledged about David Cooper since his passing in March. His clinical and scientific accomplishments, his groundbreaking research, his distinguished academic leadership. But as the representative of people living with HIV in Australia, I'd like to pay special tribute to David as a champion for the rights of positive people. In particular, the right to dignity and the right to be involved. Very early on, David recognised that HIV was more than just a fascinating medical phenomenon. He understood that it was a very human problem requiring the utmost compassion. A colleague at NAPWA who worked as a nurse at St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney during the horror years of the mid-1980s recalls that he was always David. No matter who you were, whenever anybody spoke of David, everybody knew who you meant. I recently watched a television drama that documented the fear and ignorance surrounding AIDS back in the day. In one particular scene, two nurses dressed in heavy-duty bioprotective clothing care for a man who is dying of AIDS. When one nurse wipes a tear from his eye, the second nurse rebukes her, saying, "Don't ever wipe tears without gloves." Well, David wiped tears without gloves. He spoke often about the effects of ignorance and stigma on his patients, with some staff refusing to take food trays into HIV-positive patients' rooms. His approach, which was embraced by the Sisters of Charity who ran St Vincent's Hospital, was that every patient deserved dignity, care and compassion, and that none would be turned away. David also understood how important the involvement of positive people was in our response to the epidemic. Very soon after the first cases of HIV were diagnosed in Australia, activists from the gay community began communicating with each other. Networks were formed to share what little information we had at that time, and David was always willing to engage with the community and share what he knew. Inclusive and effective research collaborations were born. Networks of private practitioners and public health clinics at the coalface joined with those providing community-based programs and services. Integral to all of this was how quickly and decisively David worked to ensure these collaborations included people with HIV and the communities being most affected by HIV in Australia, notably gay men, sex workers and people who inject drugs. By the late 1980s, David set up research study groups and networks within the National Centre for HIV, which would later become known as the Kirby Institute. Community representatives were made welcome at those networks by David, and they quickly became bubbling cauldrons of energy and compassion and the occasional tantrum. But while driven by urgency, they were also necessarily matched by David's insistence on the pursuit of excellence. Ultimately, this combination of urgency and the need for research excellence has underpinned the Kirby Institute's enormous contributions to HIV science over many years. These research working groups were inhabited by many of the community leaders, treatment officers, educators and advocates of the time. We hailed from all segments of the community response, and we were all arguing for our own respective priorities. David debated the issues when we were pushing for things to be better, to be faster, or when we were demanding more attention on an emerging issue. He balanced that churn of expectations and desire for attention in extraordinarily patient ways. Even when some of the more extreme responses of the time were aimed directly at him, he always remained generous and good-humoured. David supported our organisations with funders and politicians. He spent time in dialogue with the community leaders and activists, many of whom were his own patients. He would listen, and he was determined to find collaboration and partnership, even when there was frustration and tension over the intersections of science, policy and activism. Those who worked alongside him and who were often across the table from him in these roller coaster times, recognised a true ally to be embraced. His personal devotion to the people most affected by the virus was extraordinary. Patients were his focus. They gave him much inspiration over the years and much humility. And for that we honour him, and indeed for that we loved him. Thank you.
As I said earlier, David has been very much involved together with the Thai Red Cross to develop and conduct clinical trials in Thailand with Prapan, and we have the pleasure to have the new generation today with us, who is going to continue the work that Prapan, Yup, David started all together. Nitaya is the Chief of Search and the Chief of Prevention Department at the Thai Red Cross AIDS Research Center in Bangkok. She joined the AIDS Research Center in Bangkok in 2002 to lead a countrywide prevention of mother-to-child transmission operational study. She has a deep interest in HIV prevention and key population, especially around the use of community-led health services approaches to enhance access to HIV testing, prevention and treatment. Nitaya started the country's first test and treat study among 800 Thai MSM and transgender women in 2012. She currently works actively with community and government partners to establish a national technical assistance platform to support the accreditation and legislation of the CLHS model to ensure its sustainability through domestic financing mechanisms. Nitaya?
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And it is truly my great pleasure to give this talk in this Remembering David Cooper session in the IAS members meeting this year, because I believe that each one of you in the audiences has some connection with Professor David Cooper. And in this talk, I'm going to cover some best practices in testing, treatment, prevention in Thailand and also in other countries in the region, all aiming at preventing new HIV cases, and also to touch about the South-to-South collaborations in which Professor David Cooper has been main driver in the Asia-Pacific region. So in our region, Asia-Pacific region, New South Wales has always been our big brother or big sisters in which other countries are always looking up to in their ending AIDS strategy. And this EPIC New South Wales study, in which Professor David Cooper is the co-PI with Professor Andrew Grulich, has demonstrated that it's not only this rapid targeted large-scale PrEP rollout that has brought down the number of new HIV cases in New South Wales, but it's actually a decades-long combination of many things. The strong communities ending AIDS campaign, plus a very committed Ministry of Health, and plus a very wide network of gay-friendly sexual health services, and also a very positive consensus of on PrEP from health professionals in New South Wales that has really showing this impact on new HIV cases. So in this study, it demonstrated that it is because of Professor David Cooper's political and scientific leadership that has actually brought to us the strong commitment from the government of New South Wales, as well as the donation of large amount of PrEP drug from the Gilead that get the study started. So now in New South Wales, you can choose how to end AIDS, whether that being using condoms consistently or taking PrEP and or getting to be undetectable. So using that example from New South Wales, it's not only in New South Wales that the serious engagement of key populations has led to us to see the impact on the responses to HIV. But now we have this term, key population-led health services, or KPLHS, in which we used to advocate for the KP community leadership in order to design by themselves and deliver by themselves the services which are needs-based, demand-driven, and client-centered. And these services are provided in a way that it is through partnership between community-based organization and government and public health facilities. And in this model, the certain health of services can be provided by trained KP-led providers in order to do mainly HIV testing, dispensing of PrEP, PEP, and ART for stable clients. And these are services provided in places in service hours which are most suitable for key populations. So in Thailand, we have demonstrated that this KPLHS system has very successfully helped us to identify populations with high prevalence and also high incidence. And these are populations who are MSM, male sex workers, transgender sex workers, transgender women with very, very high incidence, as you can see here, who are prime targets for PrEP services. And it may seem simple, but I would like to stress here that the serious engagement of key populations in this KPLHS model is something that is going beyond just the simple conventional role of having KP communities providing educational brochures, condoms, lubricants, but it is truly the empowerment of key populations lay providers who can do HIV testing, who can dispense PrEP, who can dispense PEP and ART to their friends, as well as engage them in both treatment and prevention services. So I would just now shift a little bit to the treatment side of the HIV cascade, aiming at preventing new HIV cases. And we know treatment is prevention. Treatment at any CD4 count should be what we are already doing now. But have we been doing good enough in terms of trying to start ART as soon as possible for everyone? So in the many countries in our region, we are doing better and better for the first 90, but the second 90 is the worst, and that resulted in just half or less than half of people living with HIV in our countries who has achieved that suppressed viral load. So in Bangkok, we have this Thai Red Cross Anonymous Clinic, which is the largest HIV testing clinic, part of the HIVNAT research collaboration, that we have seen more than 40,000 people coming in for HIV testing. And in this model, what we are doing is that we use our clinic, HIV testing clinic, as a same-day ART initiation hub. So we just initiate people on ART on the exact same day that they come in, tested HIV positive. Okay. And this can be clients coming into our clinic or clients referred from other KPLHS site to our clinic. ART will be dispensed, will be prescribed to these clients after we have ruling out TB infection by chest X-ray, symptom screening, and ruling out cryptococcal meningitis by physical exam and crypto antigen. But ART will not be prescribed for no more than 2.5 months because we are just ART initiation hub. We are testing site. We then will refer the clients with help from navigators to the registered hospital for their long-term ART care. And we can see that 80% of people can start at ART on that exact same day of having HIV diagnosis, and the rest will be started within the 7 days. And retention rate is very high, more than 90% at month 3 and 6, with a viral load suppression of almost 95% at month 6. And then for the prevention side, we have many modalities, but we have not been using it very effectively. So if we look at the example from the EPIC New South Wales, that's the nurse-led PrEP program. Can we do that in other settings? And can we further demedicalize PrEP dispensing role to someone who are KP-led providers? So that's what we are now doing in Thailand, in which trained KP-led providers can dispense PrEP to their clients within the same day, again, same day concept of getting their HIV negative status. And right now, more than half of all Thai PrEP users are receiving PrEP through this KPLHS site. So what we can see here is that we have around 1 million MSM and transgender women in Thailand. And let's say that around 20% of them are at risk for getting HIV infection. We would love to see 200,000 people on PrEP. We only now have 5,000 people on PrEP. So that's only like less than 3% coverage of PrEP. So we are doing really, really bad, although people are saying that Thailand is one of the leader for PrEP in the region. No, we want to get to that New South Wales level, not just the Bangkok and Thailand level. Thank you. So this is just a flow to show to you that we can simplify PrEP. You know, we can simplify PrEP. Anyone coming in for HIV testing, tested negative, and are interested to get PrEP, they can have that bottle of PrEP dispensed to them on that day. We can just wait for creatinine result and hepatitis B serology to come back a few days later on, be verified by doctors, and when we just call the clients whether or not you can continue PrEP or you have to come back to get further referral for investigation if you have abnormal kidney function. So what I would like to say here is that in Asia, countries in the Asia-Pacific region have been learning so much from each other throughout these past 3 decades in an effort to end AIDS. And this could not happen if we do not have the initiation by Professor David Cooper, Professor Jup Lang, and Professor Prapan to form HIFNAT and to be part of the Treat Asia collaboration networks. And you can see here that the key success to these collaborations is the mutual learning and sharing of experiences between countries. And we always do this with respect and with joy. Even that will be over, will be like teaching, mentoring, or coaching over a dinner with a glass of wine or beer, as you can see, or in a clinic room, looking into someone's tuchi all day long. We always do that with happiness and with respect. And that's the key of the success in collaborations in a regional setting. So I'll just end by going quickly through some examples of how South-to-South learning can really help pushing PrEP implementation in the region forward. So example here is that when the countries in our region learn from New South Wales, learn from Thailand, who is the first country who demonstrate the PrEP project. Now Taiwan also have this Taiwan CDC-led PrEP demo project in which they were able to only enroll 300 people out of 1,000 people because of an attack from the anti-LGBT group in the country. But data generated is so rich in terms of the on-demand PrEP using or the access of PrEP from outside of the country sources by Taiwan MSM. Vietnam has also seen a very rapid uptake of PrEP over just the past year. And this is again the demonstration of how KP co-creation in PrEP service design and demand creation has played an important role here. Malaysia also just started its My PrEP project for 150 MSM, aiming to explore 3 different PrEP service delivery models. One is through university hospital, another one through a private clinic, and the last one through CBO clinic led by the PT Foundation. The Philippines has this Project PrEP, led by Love Yourself and the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine. They quickly completed enrollment of 250 MSM and has seen a growing pool of now more than 3,000 MSM in wait list for PrEP. So this again shows to you that the KP-led community health center can successfully generate demand and deliver the services. So in conclusion, we aiming at preventing new HIV infections in Thailand, in other countries in the region, we know that treat all is still not true for a few countries, especially those with large epidemic. But we should aim for same-day ART. At the same time, PrEP is also not yet available for free outside of demonstration projects in any countries. But we also should aim for same-day PrEP, as well as aim for KP-led PrEP service delivery model. And it is very challenging that we know that HIV testing, treatment, and prevention services provided by KP-led providers are not professionally or legally accepted. But it tells us that we really need to urgently demedicalize HIV testing, ART, and PrEP. And lastly, South-to-South collaborations, I feel strongly that it will be the most culturally, religiously acceptable and sustainable way to end AIDS in our region. Thank you very much.
It was really impossible to have this moment of remembering David without Michael Kirby. Michael, I'm so pleased to introduce you. Michael, when he retired from the High Court of Australia on February 2009, Michael Kirby was Australia's longest serving judge. After a distinguished career starting in the mid-70s, he was appointed to the High Court of Australia, followed in 1996 when he served 13 years. In later years, he was acting Chief Justice of Australia twice. In addition to his judicial duties, Michael has served on many national and international bodies. Among the latter has been service as a member of many commissions and reviews, including WHO Global Commission on AIDS. Michael has been public advocate for gay rights and a leader in the global response to HIV since the beginning. This commitment to human rights and the response to HIV was recognized when he became patron of the Kirby Institute on blood-borne disease in Sydney since 2011, the institute directed by David Cooper. Most recently, Michael was invested by Japan with the insignia of the Order of the Rising Sun, Gold and Silver Star in Tokyo, with an audience with the Emperor of Japan. Michael.
David's family came from Lithuania. Lithuania was a very dangerous place for people of Jewish ethnicity during the Second World War, but happily they escaped from Lithuania and came to Australia just before the war. It's another reminder of the tremendous loss that was suffered by humanity in the cruelty of those times, and out of hatred of people for who they are, not for anything they do to others, but just for who they are. And David learned of his family's suffering from his parents, and he was determined that in his life he would not allow that to happen so far as he could stop it. His education was remarkable, and he went up to Sydney University at the age of 15. And at the university he did brilliantly. He wrote his first letter to the Lancet at the age of 22, and some people might have retired on the basis of that, but that was just an encouragement to David to keep going. He went to Boston and worked in immunology, and except for the arrival on the scene of this strange, new, virus, he might have had a fairly orthodox and predictable career in immunology, but the moment made the man, and the opportunities that were presented to him in Boston, he took back to his own country, Australia, and as you've heard, he became the leader and an international leader in describing the course of the HIV epidemic and participating in all of the drug trials. He naturally fell under the spell, for that it was, of Jonathan Mann. We must never, in the International AIDS Society, forget that magnificent leader with his charisma, his courage, a certain wildness, his determination, his strength, and his imagination. And I think a great deal in understanding the very essence of David Cooper comes from understanding the world that Jonathan Mann created in the field of AIDS. David introduced me to Jonathan Mann. I was at the time a deeply respectable and even more deeply closeted gay man. But David, though he was not himself gay, had a sort of grinder-like capacity to work us all out. And so he dragged me along to a dinner in Rose Bay on Sydney Harbour to meet the great Jonathan. And Jonathan invited me to Geneva to take part in the first Global Commission on AIDS of the World Health Organization. And that was a tremendously important initiative of the world. And we should also not forget Halfdan Mahler, the Director General of WHO at that time, because he took steps to support Jonathan, to summon him back to Geneva from Zaire, Congo, and to give leadership to the world with a staff of one. Kathleen Kay, an Australian young woman who worked with Jonathan. And so Jonathan was there, and David came there, and David was greatly influenced by Jonathan Mann's lessons. And those lessons were essentially, we are not going to beat this epidemic, and probably in the future we will never beat other epidemics simply by dealing with them as a medical issue. This is a new epidemiology, and we must embrace it, and we must understand it, and we must practice it in our response to HIV. Whenever disputes arose in the Kirby Institute, David, so John Caldor has described it, would listen quietly because he was very egalitarian in his approach. In that, he was, in a sense, a typical Australian. He wasn't hierarchical, but then from the back of the room would come, in a high-pitched voice, "Oh, I don't know that would work." And that would lead on to David giving leadership and giving direction, and he was just remarkable. He was loved by his staff, he was loved by his patients, and he was loved by his family. And I pay respects to Ilana, who is here, and she will take back to Australia the memories of the great tributes that have been paid to David during this conference. We honour ourselves by honouring our heroes, and our heroes include Jonathan Mann and David Cooper. And I thank Linda Gale Becker, and I thank Peter Rees, and I thank all of the leaders of the International AIDS Society for honouring David, because that is the right thing to do in this epidemic, and David sure deserved it. He set up his institute in Australia, and its full name, wait for it, was the National Centre for HIV Epidemiology and Clinical Research. And as an acronym, the acronym came down to NCHECA. And when he ultimately decided to change the name, the now Prime Minister of Australia came along and said he thought it was a good thing to change the name because NCHECA sounded like the security service of the Czech Republic. And therefore, David opted for the Kirby Institute. No, 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 I said, no. It must be a scientist. It must be a scientist. The Burnett Institute, named after a Nobel laureate from Australia. The Doherty Institute, named after another Nobel laureate. I said, we go searching for a Nobel laureate. And David said, no, I want to make Jonathan Mann's point. This is an epidemic of speciality. David was marked from birth with chesed. That is the Jewish love that comes from kindness. And in any case, he insisted on my name, and so it is. And in a sense, therefore, the name of the Kirby Institute is a symbol of what Jonathan Mann was teaching about this epidemic. It was very scientific. It was mostly scientific. And the science is tremendously important, as we know at this conference. But it wasn't only scientific. And it has taught us about loving kindness to people who use drugs, to people who sell sex, to people who have sex with their own gender and other stigmatised communities. So what would David have loved about this conference, apart from the lovely comments that have been made? He would have loved seeing his dear friends as co-chairs. He would have loved the memory of Joop Lange and the tribute that was paid to the victims on MH17. And David would have insisted, I don't just remember the AIDS scientists and those who are coming to the Melbourne conference. I remember everyone who was on that plane. And if I can say so, and this is the lawyer and the old judge talking now, if I can say so, one thing that out of politeness and proper focus the co-chairs didn't mention, but I'll mention it. One day there must be accountability for those who sold or sent the missile that brought down that plane and caused so much unkindness and human suffering. And I'll never forget the moment in Melbourne when the Netherlands delegation came onto the stage holding each other's hands in solidarity and just walking to the stage to be acknowledged by the Australian hosts and the other audience there. That was a dreadful, dreadful thing to do, and it added to the pain. But there will one day be accountability. David would have loved the contemplation of the populist politics that is now besetting our world. David would have been thrilled at a conference that I went to last night for the presidents on AIDS in conservative societies. How do you face HIV in conservative societies? And when they said, we will never get things done that need to be done, I said, you don't think Australia was a conservative society in 1988? It was a very conservative society. But leadership, strength, unity, solidarity made the difference. Philippines, Russia, Hungary, Venezuela, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq. These people still need the David Cooper and Jonathan Mann support. And he would be very intrigued with the co-infections. He would be alarmed at the waning support financially for this epidemic. He would be thrilled with the new opportunities. He would be pleased with the increased donations, and in particular from the government of the Netherlands. He would be very interested in the report we just had on PrEP and how it is spreading throughout the world. And he would be very, very interested in the prospects of a vaccine, because David Cooper didn't think we would ever end HIV and AIDS unless we have a vaccine. And so it's good for us to pause. It's the correct thing to do. It reminds us of the historical character of the journey that we're on with HIV. It reminds us of the heroes who light the way ahead. And it teaches us over and over again, we must not entirely remedicalise HIV and AIDS. It is a very peculiar condition, and there are others like it, and it requires civil society with medical science and politicians to join together in overcoming it. David Cooper wiped the tears. He can't wipe away our tears. We will remember David Cooper as a great scientist, a fine Australian, a kind man, a brilliant physician, and a very dedicated member of the IAS, which does so much good in every corner of the world.
To end this remembering, I would like to introduce the Kirby Institute movie of David's memorial and life.
I've known him as long as I can remember. He's been part of my life always. Our parents were friends, so they'd get together for lunches and afternoon teas and whatever, and Dave and I would chatter in the other room, mostly about schoolwork, because there wasn't much else to talk about. I think this great love of learning was his more than mine, and I think that's why my mother really fostered this relationship.
I actually met him at Leonora's place. Our parents were all friends, and as I recall, we met 6 or 8 weeks before the leaving certificate, and he and I wanted to go home and study, and Leonora wanted to play ping pong. That was the... And we've been friends ever since. We were best man at each other's weddings.
My girlfriend discovered they were staying with a Jewish doctor who was unattached at the moment, and she decided to invite us all for dinner. And I loved his sense of humour. He's so shy, he's not going to call me. Yeah, we married early 1981, and we went to Boston for 2 years. He was going to come back to St Vincent's Hospital and be an allergist. And while we were in Boston, I remember the news reports about this strange disease. Whatever it was, he just knew it was going to come to St Vincent's Hospital.
Sydney, the hospital, is on one side is the gay community, and on the other side is the sort of King's Cross, sex, drugs, rock and roll, right? And so I thought, well, if it's going to be a problem in any hospital in Australia, it would have to be at my institution. And and that's what happens. That's where we saw the first cases. But it was difficult, and you know, in the peak year, which would have been 92, 93, I would have had a ward of about 36 people, you know, continuously, quite very, very sick and dying and really difficult. And it was a very, very stressful time for me. In the end, I just couldn't even face going to funerals. It was just so horrible. You know.
He felt each loss personally. He used to get very depressed, and we'd say, "What's wrong?" He said, "Oh, 2 patients died this week, and they were such lovely people. They were good people. They shouldn't be dying of this stupid disease."
He would speak to his family more than once a day, and always at the end of those phone calls, "Love you," every single time. And you know, that was a couple of times a day. He was in touch all the time, or playing on his phone, sending messages to them with, I'm told, lots of emojis.
Even his use of emoticons at the end of messages when he'd be overseas, he'd be like, "On board, love you, kiss, kiss, wine, wine.
Hug, hug, airplane,
airplane, airplane.
Airplane chair, airplane chair.
Home, home."
They were an incredibly important, the most important part of his life. There's no doubt about it. His love for his family.
He was fascinated by everything, interested in everything. I don't understand his fascination with birds and flowers, but it was beautiful. You should see all the field guides I've got to birds and flowers.
There was one time we were all sitting in the van waiting for David to come in, and he was taking his wet pants off. It took about 5 minutes for him to get them off, and it was choreographed like out of the Three Stooges movie. And I looked at our guide and I said to her, "Do you know that this guy's a professor of medicine?" It was very funny.
It was very funny.
It was really special that we could do Mardi Gras with him. I think just even for Ilana and I to see, you know, you're sort of in a marshalling area backstage at Mardi Gras for hours and hours, and we were standing there with Dad. We were putting glitter hairspray in his hair, and the amount of young men that would just come up to him, and they were so emotional at seeing him participating in the event. The meaning that it had for these men to see their doctor in many cases fully participating and dressing up in Mardi Gras.
Fighting the fight with them.
Yeah, and having his daughters with him was really important. His patients were so much more to him than just patients, and he was so much more than just their doctor.
When he's aware that he's going to pass, the first thing that pops to his mind is the people that played a significant part in his life and in him being able to achieve what he wanted to achieve. And it was, you know, St Vincent's Hospital, it was the university, it was the Kirby Institute, all of which he knew he had a really good life. And he said it. He said it a million times. I've had a good life. And he had a good life because of the people that supported him.
In putting this together, it's really just shown the enormity of the loss. David meant so much to so many people in so many different ways. As a clinician, as a researcher, as a mentor, in all those roles, as a dad and a grandfather, and it's hard. It's hard to think of the Kirby Institute without David. I'm sure it's hard for his family to think of life without David and his patients. And he was just such an amazing man, and it's difficult to think of how we go sort of forward without his leadership. But I know he would want us to, and I know he would want us to continue doing all the things that he wanted achieved.
The loss for us is incomprehensible. It's been a few weeks now, and none of us really can come to terms with it, knowing that we'll never see him again.
I think I've been overwhelmed at
the colleagues that are really, they're not mourning the loss of an HIV professor, they're mourning the loss of a close friend. So it's such a beautiful thing to be able to grieve with a whole community of people affected by Dad. But seeing the various communities that have been affected, from the nuns to the gay boys to international researchers, I guess we're reminded of his global impact, but also that the community support that we have because of what he was doing.
I'm sure you all will join me in thanking so much the co-chairs, Francoise, Sharon, for, together with the community, putting that together. Again, I want to thank Lana for being here from the family, and very especially want to thank everyone who gave from the heart. Most of us, of course, were not able to go to Sydney a few weeks ago, but thank you for bringing some of that to us here, and we really appreciate what you've done for us today. I do want to mention, I think it is important that on the very same day, we lost another champion in the HIV treatment, care, research world, and that was Dr. Fred Gordon. And I do want to pay tribute to Fred as well. He was a physician, a pioneer in HIV and TB research, chief of the infectious diseases section and epidemiology at the VA. And we certainly do miss Fred as well. I will just take 1 second to say, Madiba, it is his centenary year. He said, "What counts is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is the difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead." And I think you will agree with me that we've seen today, and we know through David and through Fred, that they lived significant lives because they changed so many lives in the world today. So I'm going to change gears a little bit now. We are getting to the point where we're going to join together, have some networking and some refreshments. But before we do that, we have a tradition that we always do, and it's important that we honor people also while they're with us when they do some amazing work. And for this, I want to bring up my very dear friend, Dr. Chris Byra, who is leaving the Governing Council, but not leaving our community, and I dare say will not be leaving service, because here is a doer and somebody who makes difference in people's lives as well. So Chris, if you'll join me for a moment. I do want to point out that Chris, in the last 2 years, has not been sitting idle. Besides doing all the work he normally does, we'll be going into a session, as was mentioned, in a few minutes, which is the IAS Lancet Commission. And that has been an awesome lift that I promise you, had Chris not been at the helm of it, we would not have been able to get together by today. So that's just one tiny fraction of the miracles that this man can bring about. And I want to thank you, Chris, personally, because you are a mentor of mine and a great encourager, but you've also served really unbelievably this society. And so on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you for your contribution. And there's a small gift. There we go.
That's yours. This is a preview of what's arriving at your home.
Oh, isn't that beautiful? Thank you.
We're all going to stand for a photo.
Oh, for standing for a photo.
Oh, and I'm joining in.
Thank you guys, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you so much. And so with that, we end the members' meeting of AIDS 2018. Please join us for some refreshments. And if you can, join us in about 15 minutes now for the Lancet IAS. But as mentioned, we're going to just keep mingling and have refreshments. We'll let you know when we are convening for the IAS Lancet Commission launch. Thank you.